Today I'm going to take you through the process of how we went from this grubby looking fireplace into this beautifully smooth chimney breast from top to bottom, and take special note of these bullnose corners. This was a special request from the client and we obliged, and you can see now the finish on it is lovely. Fireplace, we want to get this all rendered out and smooth, but there's a lot going on here. So we've got big holes here that needs supporting because there's weight going through that. Not quite sure how it's standing, but anyway, they need filling up. So we're gonna dig down here, get all the loose rubble up, and hopefully we'll meet a solid floor and get that bricked in. So we've dug around and we've got out all the loose rubble until we've found somewhat solid ground, and then we're gonna throw in some mortar down there and build that up. So we've got something to go onto. So you can see now they've been bricked up. They need to firm up a bit, but at least we've got something to go onto there now. The SBR slurry is on. Still a bit too wet. I'm gonna let that get a little bit more tacky, and then I'm gonna go on with the sand and cement. I tell you what, getting that sand and cement on is no joke. That's tough work. That's the scratch coat. There we have it. That is the first scratch coat. I've built this up last. It's just a bit of timber with a bit of the sandbag, stop it from sticking. So in order to build these sides, I've had to dollop on a load of sanded cement, just lash it onto the corner so it sticks as a blob, and then I've worked the trowel away from the corner. So I haven't used any board or timber to support it. I've just dolloped it on at the corner and then worked away. So you end up with something approximating a right angle, but because we wanted a bullnose corner, I've worked the trowel down that edge as well, just to round it off roughly. Here we are the next day. I've just taken the board out. If you can see here, it's got a nice little tip. I've just stapled to the back of that just some offcuts from the sandbag, and that was obviously positioned there, and that stopped the cement sticking, whereas on wood you might be prizing it off, and you can see there you got a nice straight line now. So this is ready for a second coat. I'm not going to coat this outer layer, that's just going to be skim on top of that, and then we're going to make up these corners to get a nice beveled corner there. And for that I'll be using this corner trowel here. Time for the second coat. So you might have noticed I've used another 4-to-1 mix. The scratch coat was a 4-to-1 sharp sand to cement, and this is actually a 4-to-1 plaster sand. Now usually people put on a slightly weaker mix, i.e. you'll do 5 sand to 1 cement, but because plaster sand is finer than your regular sharp sand, it is actually a sort of weaker mix. So I've gone with the same ratio because of the sand grain grit difference, and the plaster sand is just a lot smoother than the sharp sand. You're not going to find pebbles and large aggregate in there, and obviously because of that it's not quite as strong, so I've used the same ratio there, and that should be absolutely fine. Really what I want is the strength of that cement on those corners that are going to be made up freehand with the trowel, so that's part of the reason for having a slightly stronger mix still. I'd also like to talk about the bare brick of the fireplace. So this is an image before it was tidied up a bit, but you can see all of that soot. Now what a lot of people do is use a bitumen paint to paint over that, and the idea behind this is to create a seal that stops any of that soot from bleeding through onto the plaster. Now in this particular instance there is going to be no log burner installed, but if there was, you wouldn't want to apply a huge heat source to something like bitumen paint because it's going to fume and it's going to smell. It's a nasty old chemical. We've used an SBR and cement slurry that's going to have the same effect of stopping any penetrating soot. However, it's far more low profile than a paint, and it is also becomes chemically bonded within the render and within the brick. So it's going to have much less of a chance of reacting negatively to the heat. Like I said, there isn't going to be a log burner installed, but even if there was in the future, if you brought the log burner out several inches from the back of that wall, which they've got the room for here, then there wouldn't be enough heat to have any negative fuming or smelling at that point.
I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but this is how I'm getting the stuff on the corner.
So I'm throwing it onto the corner and I'm working away from the corner, and that's in both directions of that angle, working away from the corner. This now is the first stroke with the bullnose trowel, and immediately a mistake. I've not angled it correctly. I've caught that sand and cement, and because of its weight, that's what's going to happen. Now watch this next upstroke. It's almost perfect. That's a beautifully straight, neat corner there, apart from that gap. And because of that gap, I have to add a bit more material. But because I add that material, you end up creating these bulges. As you can see, I've sort of moved a bulge around. So you've got to take a bit of material off. And then, once you've taken a bit of material off, you might be left with hollows that you can see there as well. So it's a tricky business. If you can get it in the first two strokes and leave it, then that's the best thing to do. But there's so many variables in this and so many things can happen that it's hardly ever going to be perfect. And you can see it's coming off again. Some of that sand and cement will have dried out, so we've got to put some fresh sand and cement on to keep it on that corner. At this stage, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to have another 2 coats with multi-finish, so there's going to be a further refining process, but you want to get it as good as you can because it makes the job that's coming easier. I think we're getting close now to some of the final strokes to a point where it's acceptable for me, and I think this now is the final stroke. And if you do your best is good enough.
Right, that's close enough. Jesus.
Essentially now what I'm doing there is ruling it all off. I'm going to fill any hollows, and we're going to make sure that that is nice and flat. And we'll do the same for the sides as well.
So here it is. This is with the corners more or less fashioned. That will be gone over with multi-skim, so it will continue to get straighter and neater. Those walls are flat now. That's what the join looks like. We've got the bead in first to make sure we know where to work from. So this has been left to dry now for 5 days roughly. The sand and cement is cured nicely. There's no shrinkage cracks. That's probably because we added a bit of SBR to the mix just to give it a bit of flexibility. The corners have turned out nice. This curved corner that meets the straight. We're going to get an angle bead on here, and we're going to skim from there because there's a bit of a build up on the sand and cement here. So the angle bead's going to bring it out slightly, and then that'll be flush.
So the render's had a coat of SBR, and the whole chimney breast has had 1 coat of SBR, neat SBR, and then we've got the fan on that to dry it out. This is the first coat of skim, and I've decided to start with the chimney breast on what is the already plastered walls, and then to get to the sand and cement render later on. And the reason for that is the sand and cement render will have a higher suction than those walls, and I may need more time to play with the plaster at the corners and to fill any hollows in that awkward space, and therefore I've gone on last with that. plastering can be very awkward. You got to be a bit of a contortionist sometimes. This is the side of plastering that most people don't see. It's so physical, and you usually have to dance around furniture, and sometimes you've just got to use what you've got and what you can in order to get the job done. You might not be able to tell there, but my arm is, or the trowel should I say, is a long way from my shoulder at that point. And I think at that point my anterior deltoid was really aching. And that's a strength thing, you know, you need the strength to do a job like this. Again, it's something that people don't see, they don't account for. But just having that physicality, you need it in order to be able to do what looks like a simple job like this, but it isn't. What you can see me do now is I'm building up those corners. I'm making sure there's a whole load of material on those corners that I've got to play with. But I'm not going over it straight away. I'm not taking the bullnose trowel to it straight away. I'm going to leave that plaster to firm up. It would be too wet at the moment. I'd just be smearing it all up and down and it'd be a right mess. But I've got the material on there and I'm going to let it firm up before approaching it with the bullnose trowel. I'm just getting in any of the corners which are hard to reach there, easy to miss because it's in a dark cavity, and just making sure that each part of that chimney breast is getting a good layer of skim on. So we've got the first layer on, and now we're going to flatten in. We're going to take out any big trowel lines, try and fill in any hollows, get those edges a bit nicer on the sides of the chimney breast, inside of that cavity, get those internal corners neater. The external corners are firming up now. So I've got a load of material on these curved corners. That's how we're going to tackle it with this. I've allowed the plaster to firm up a fair bit. It might still be a bit wet. It could firm up even more, to be fair, but we're going to give that a go at this point. See how we fare. Unfortunately, I ran out of space on my phone at this point, so I had to go away and had to delete a load of things. By the time I had a bit more space again, I'd already put on a second coat and I'd already flattened in. And what you can see me do now is I'm giving everything a wet trowel. So unfortunately, I've missed out a section there of the refining process of those corners, but you kind of get the idea. It's just a case of going over it and getting out those trowel lines. Now, with that bullnose trowel, you do leave lines roughly 3 inches either side, and they're a little trickier to get out because you're so close to the corner. The corner, that curve becomes like a protected area once you've got it right, and so you have to work away from the corner, work toward it, but not actually go as far as the curve to get out those trowel lines. It is tricky and it does take a bit of time going over. Giving everything here a wet polish the underside of that lintel as well, that's been skimmed. And that's basically it. That is the final article. You can see we've got a lovely smooth glass-like finish to the plaster. Rembrandt will be proud. And these are the corners. They've worked out wonderfully. They're a really nice feature to the room. It's something a little different, and they're absolutely solid because they've been done with sand and cement. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and hit the subscribe button. It really helped the channel to grow. Thanks for watching.